Good afternoon. I'm Charmaine Colvin, and you are listening to Apna Radio 93.9 Dublin South FM. On India this week, India's government has proposed that artificial intelligence and social media firms should clearly label AI generated content to tackle the spread of deep fake and misinformation, prompted by similar moves by the European Union and China. With nearly 1 billion internet users, the stakes are high in a sprawling country of many ethnic and religious communities, where fake news risks stirring up deadly strife and AI deepfake videos have alarmed officials during elections. The new rules require platforms to label AI generated content with markers covering at least 10% of the surface area of a visual display or the initial 10% of the duration of an audio clip, placing more responsibilities on the likes of OpenAI, Meta, X, and Google. Social media companies will also have to obtain a user declaration on whether uploaded information is AI generated and deploy reasonable technical measures to ensure checks and balances, the Indian government's draft proposal said. The rules will ensure visible labelling, metadata traceability, and transparency for all public facing AI generated media, India's IT ministry said, inviting suggestions from the public and industry by November the 6th. The potential for misuse of generative AI tools to cause user harm, spread misinformation, manipulate elections, or impersonate individuals has grown significantly, the government added. The rules about covering 10% of surface area are among the first explicit attempts globally to prescribe a quantifiable visibility standard, said Dhruv Garg, founding member at public policy research firm Indian Governance and Policy Project. If implemented, the rules will require AI platforms in India to build in automated labelling systems to identify and mark AI generated content at the point of creation, he added. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said that India was its second largest market by number of users, which has tripled in the past year. US President Donald Trump has reiterated that India has agreed to reduce its purchase of Russian crude. Trump said Indian PM Narendra Modi had assured him during a phone call on Tuesday that Delhi was not going to buy much oil from Russia, as he too wants to see the war end with Russia-Ukraine. Modi acknowledged Trump's call and his warm greetings on the festival of Diwali in a social media post, but didn't comment on Russian oil. Trump has made a similar remark last week, but the Indian Foreign Ministry said at the time it was not aware of any phone call between the leaders. On Wednesday, an official at the ministry said that it had no new comment on Trump's latest remarks. India became one of the biggest markets for Russian oil as Western nations shunned purchases and imposed sanctions on Moscow after the Ukraine war started in 2022. Delhi increased its imports and bought Russian crude at discounted prices, saying the decision was vital to provide energy security to millions of its people. Delhi also pointed out that many Western nations, including the US, continued to have trade ties with Russia. In recent months, US officials have accused Delhi of helping to fund Russia's war against Ukraine by continuing to buy crude oil, a claim that Delhi denies. The Trump administration has put both public and diplomatic pressure on Delhi to reduce its support for Moscow's energy market as part of efforts to economically isolate the Kremlin and push for an end to the war in the Ukraine. Oil and gas are Russia's largest exports, and Moscow's biggest customers include China, India, and Turkey. As part of this pressure, the US has imposed 50% tariffs, including an additional 25% as a penalty for buying Russian oil, on Indian goods. However, the US president's tone has softened in recent days as trade negotiations between the two countries progress. A report in the Mint newspaper suggested that a deal could be announced soon, and India may agree to gradually reduce its imports of Russian oil, citing three sources familiar with the matter. India's capital Delhi woke up to a toxic haze as air quality worsened after the Hindu festival of Diwali, despite a court directive to use less polluting crackers. People set off fireworks during the festival, which is also observed by Sikhs and Jains, until late on Monday, defying the court's order to use only green fireworks for a limited period of time. Delhi, which has high pollution through the year due to factors including vehicular emissions and dust, had already seen air quality dipping over the past few days. Earlier this week, the air quality index in Delhi was 360. The AQI measures the level of PM 2.5, fine particulate matter, that can clog lungs and cause a host of diseases in the air. Levels between 101 and 200 are considered moderate, while those between 201 and 300 are poor. Between 301 and 400, it's categorised as very poor, and a figure higher than 400 is considered severe. The WHO guidelines say that exposure to PM 2.5 over a 24-hour period should be limited to 15 micrograms per cubic metre, but Delhi's AQI in some parts is 24 times higher than the recommended level. The city's pollution problem becomes worse in winter as farmers in neighbouring states burn crop stubble. Low wind speeds also trap pollutants, such as those produced by firecrackers, in the lower atmosphere, making it hard to breathe. A man who was wrongfully imprisoned for more than 40 years is now facing deportation to India. After serving 43 years in prison for a murder he did not commit, Subramanian Subbu Vidam was finally free. New evidence had exonerated him earlier this month of the murder of his former roommate. However, before he could meet his family, Mr. Vidam was taken into custody by US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, who want to deport him to India, a country he has not lived in since he was a baby. Now Mr. Vidam's legal team is fighting a deportation order, and his family is determined to get him out of custody for good. More than 40 years ago, Mr. Vidam was convicted of murdering his once roommate, Tom Kinser, a 19-year-old college student. In 1984, he was sentenced to a separate 2.5 to 5 years for a drug offence as part of a plea agreement. That sentence was to be served simultaneously with his life sentence. Although exonerated for the murder charge, his drug conviction still stands. The immigration agency said it acted on a lawfully issued order. And finally, tributes are pouring in for Indian actor Govardhan Asrani, who died this week at the age of 84. Asrani, popularly known by his last name, was suffering from a brief illness and died at a hospital in Mumbai city on Monday. Over a career spanning more than 50 years, Asrani acted in more than 300 films, mostly in comic roles. One of his most memorable performances was in the 1975 blockbuster Sholay, in which he played an eccentric jailer. And that's all from me. You are listening to Apna Radio 93.9 Dublin South FM.
Everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.